We march today because our deepest religious values tell us, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children their victims. We march because all of God's creation is important, regardless of your race, your creed, your color, or who you choose to love. So I came to tell you and to declare right here and right now, looking down is not an option. Talking down is not an option. Sitting down is not an option. Being down is not an option. Falling down is not an option. Bowing down is not an option. Standing down is not an option. The guy in the White House is a mortal, not a god. The members of the General Assembly are mortals and not God. The members of the Congress, they are mortals, not God. Bowing down is not an option. Stand through the storm. Stand through the racism. Stand through the rain. Stand through the hurt. Stand.
Forward together. You fired up? Okay, listen here. My friend, the Imam Abdullah Antepli, and I have come to introduce someone to you. Great leaders communicate a vision that captures the imagination and fires the hearts and minds of those around them. Great leaders have a heart for people. They take time for the people. They instinctively look for solutions. Great leaders tell purposeful stories, and they move people to action by aiming at the heart. Listen, folks, great leaders aren't like those yahoos in Washington, D.C., who are concerned only about power. Great leaders are concerned about empowering people. Great leaders don't necessarily set out to be a leader, but they set out to make a difference in the world. This moral movement has a great leader. This moral movement has a leader who sees with his heart and with his soul and with his mind and with his strength. This moral movement has a leader who cares more about the people of this great state and nation than about a political position or a power play. He is my brother. He is our pastor. He is our prophet. He is our great leader. He is the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Put your hands together for our leader.
but to do justly, love, mercy, walk humbly with God. They should do justly, love, mercy, walk humbly with God. So what does the Lord require of thee? What doth the Lord require of thee? But to do justly, love, mercy, walk humbly with your
This has been a week of frailty for me, but when I look out and see this body, even though we do not focus on numbers, I must tell you, you make the heart glad. They tell me that in 2014, they said we had upwards of 80,000 people, and this crowd is larger than that one, and some people are still trying to get in the mall. You all know I'm a preacher. Daniel 3, there are these words. Can your God deliver you, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? O King, we don't have to answer you. Yes, our God can deliver. But if not, we will not bow down to you. In this time in which we're in, not only must we take action, but we must have an analysis. We must not only have fire, we must have focus. Sister Coleman, one of the matriarchs of the movement who's been through a lot of wars, would tell you not only must you have energy, you must have an ethic. And you must be prepared to run not a sprint, but a marathon. In times like these. I've been reading a book, The 100th Greatest Americans of the 20th Century, from a justice perspective. And the author of that book says that 100 years ago, any soapbox orator who called for women's suffrage, a federal minimum wage, or laws protecting the environment would have been considered a utopian dreamer or a dangerous socialist. But now we take these ideas for granted because the radical ideas of one generation often become common sense for the next. We all stand on the shoulders of earlier generations. I disagree so much with those that keep talking about spontaneity. No, this comes from a deep root. Seeds that were sown by people who've long since left earth, but are cheering us from the portals of heaven. We stand on the shoulders of earlier generations of organizers, activists, writers, artists, and progressive politicians who challenged the status quo of their day and who stood up and refused to bow down. In this, the 21st century, it is now our calling to have enough foolishness of faith to stand, even when we have some losing days, to stand, even when we don't win every hearing in the Senate, to stand and challenge the extremism and the forces of regressivism today. It's important that we have an analysis. 11 years ago, we marched down this same Fayetteville Street to hold our first People's Assembly. Folk told us, don't try to have a march in the middle of the winter. You'll never get the people out. They said, have it in the summer. We said, but by the time the summer comes, the legislature is over. But we also knew that if you're going to build a movement, you need foot soldiers who will come no matter what the weather is. You need some folk who know how to stand up anywhere, Mary Perry, anytime, and in front of anybody for the cause of love and justice and truth. Many of you showed up back then in extreme weather, and we've been standing together against extremism ever since. We are family. Touch your neighbor and say, what's up, homie? We are family. Our family has grown. You are the moral movement together. And it has spread to other places across this nation. We are family because the truth is, in every age, somebody has to stand up and declare that we will be the moral dissenters and the moral defibrillators of the nation. That we will not stand down. And now here in the first fifth of the 21st century, the actions of an extremist legislature in North Carolina, that extremist actions of the Republican-led Congress in D.C., and the election of an extremist narcissistic con artist in the White House has proven once again that racism and economic fear, when mixed still too often, can conjure a powerful magic which compels far too many in this nation to seek safety in hating others and finding security in the false nativism that has failed us before and will fail us again. Long before any Russians hacked our system, the American electoral process was compromised by racism and fear. We need a doctor. We need a doctor. We got plenty of them. They're coming. Some of the preachers go over and a doctor. They're coming. Look at, we're family. We take care of one another. As you well know, 4 years before extremism put Trump in the White House and emboldened Ryan and McConnell, the same extremism put McCory, Berger, and Tillis into power here in North Carolina. Let's tell the whole story. Since last November, I've met some people around the country, Nancy and Irv, who look at me and say, Rev, we've never seen this before. This is the worst thing we've ever seen. And I've had to tell them, hold on now. Don't ever say that. It is a desperation that gives too much power to extremism. And it disrespects the hard struggles like the struggle against slavery and the Trail of Tears and the fight for women's suffrage and the fight for LGBTQ rights and the fight against Jim Crow and the fight against apartheid. Don't give this Trumpism too much credit. Don't make yourselves grasshoppers. But the second thing is, when you say we've never seen this before, it's just not accurate. It's not historically accurate. Princeton historian Nell Irvin Painter has named the pattern we are witness, and she calls it America's call and response. She says what we are seeing here is the iconography of a tragic, traditionally American call and response. What am I talking about? Can I teach for a moment? Yeah. In the 19th century, following the Civil War, black and white fusion coalitions came together in the South. And together, black and white people in the 1800s reconstructed this nation as a republic that would, in fact, guarantee liberty. That it was a new birth of the nation. The 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments corrected the 3/5 compromise. They rewrote the Constitution, black and white together. They guaranteed all persons the right to life, liberty, the fruit of their own labor, the pursuit of of happiness. They guaranteed voting rights. They guaranteed criminal justice, more criminal justice fairness. They guaranteed public education, black and white together, more than 150 years ago. They even put in place a tax system that would ensure that the wealthy paid their fair share so that they could change what had happened because of the disenfranchisement of slavery. But what came with that call was a response. This radically democratic call invoked a violent backlash called the redemption movement or the deconstruction movement. The Ku Klux Klan arose in the South not to first attack white people, but black people, but to attack white people who work with black people. Yes, we saw them rally and they joined together. They joined together to be regressive. They joined together to turn back public policy. They could not stand public education for all. They could not stomach fair criminal justice reform. They could not stand voting rights for all. They thought that black and white people working together was sin. And so their mantra was, we got to take our country back and make it great again. I'm talking about in 1800. And they began to deconstruct, which ended with Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. And then finally a president, long before a white supremacist like Bannon was in the White House, Woodrow Wilson brought white supremacy in the White House when he played the movie Birth of a Nation in the White House. that was written by a playwright from Cleveland County who was a legislator right here in North Carolina. I'm here to tell you, this is not the first time America's had to deal with racism. Then there was the emergence of a second Reconstruction during what we sometimes call the Civil Rights Movement. Black and white people began to come together along with immigrants and women and poor folk and gay people and labor. And out of that movement, language changed. Presidents started talking about civil rights as a moral issue, voting rights as a moral issue. We got the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, Fair Housing Act of 68, the War on Poverty. These were the fruits of decades of struggle, expansion of Social Security, minimum wage. And they were waged, these battles, by people who knew they might never see the victory in their own lifetime. But they won so much. But then to that call, Rodney, was a response, a backlash. This time it wasn't limited to Southern segregationists. Richard Nixon ran a campaign on law and order. Tricky Dick, y'all remember him. He came up, a campaign in 1968. He had to figure out a way to out Wallace without sounding racist. So Kevin Phillips, his advisor, said, I know how you can win. Let's develop something called the Southern strategy. Let's not talk about race openly. Let's talk about race in code words like entitlement reform, tax cuts, states' rights. Yeah, new code language said, let's don't say the N word. And then let's find out who hates who and pit them against one another, because we've got to break up this black and white and brown coalition. And they used that trickery called the Southern strategy so that they could lock up the South and lock up some of the Rust Belt and the West Belt and certain suburbs in the North. But they were really after the South, because they knew that if they could cause black and white people to turn from each other rather than turn to each other, then they could control 171 electoral votes with just 13 states. They could control 26 Senate seats with just 13 states. They could control 31% of the United States House of Representatives with just 13 states. They could control 13 governors and 13 legislatures. And they knew if they could divide and conquer, they could break the second Reconstruction. And Dr. Painter says, in this moment, my brothers and sisters, we must be as wise as serpents. Well, actually, Jesus said that, and harmless as doves. But Sister Painter says we got to understand this moment in the context of an election and re-election of a president who was black, with a wife who was black, with a daughter who was black, who had pajama parties in a White House built by slaves. And you've got to understand that we're in a period of reclamation and response. And by the way, the motto of the Southern strategy was, we got to take our country back and make it great again. It began the moment President Obama broke through in the South. They wanted him to be a one-term president. They refused to govern. They let the lie go forward about birtherism. They called him a lie on the congressional floor. Countless visual stereotypes. And what Ms. Painter says, if we don't get this, we miss what's really going on in this moment. Without Barack Obama, there is no Donald Trump. Trump is obviously unsuited for the job of President of the United States. But he is suited to answer the call of reclamation and deconstruction and white lash that is as American as apple pie. My sisters and brothers, let us be clear. There's nothing unprecedented about Trump, nothing unprecedented about the extremists we see in these legislatures. There's always been this ebb and flow in American history. And there have always been people who will appeal to the lesser angels of our nature, that is as American as the red, white, and blue. But you also must hear me. This is not just about a president. We miss it if we think it is. This is about an entire web of money and influence and white hegemony that has been working to tie up the American democracy from the very inception of this country. And they've been working not from D.C. down, but from school boards and county commissioners and state legislatures up. That is why they fear a crowd like this. Even as the divide between the rich and the poor is the widest in our nation's history, our electorate is growing more diverse every year. And wealthy oligarchs know that they cannot hold on to power in truly democratic elections. So what we are witnessing is an all-out assault, foreign and domestic, on the very heart of our democracy. And this is not simply about the preservation of the Democratic Party or any party, or simply the preservation of a government conceived by human beings. We are in a moment that is fundamentally another chapter of history. This is about the well-being of creation and the survival of those creatures who bear the very image of God, you and I. We live in a moment when millions desperately need a government and a society with a heart. Millions of Americans need health care and living wages and protection from xenophobia and systemic racism and homophobia and religious bigotry and climate destruction. This is about our humanity. This is about whether a government of the people and by the people will in fact serve the people, or will it be hijacked by extremists. This is about whether we as a people can reconstruct the heart of our democracy and shock it back to life. And if you know this history, then you know we've seen it before. But not only have we seen it before, we know how to face it. Because we fought this battle together right here in North Carolina. And others fought it long before we were on the scene. We fought in these streets, in the state, in the federal courts, at the ballot box, and we've won. We haven't won everything, but you ought to celebrate every victory. And we've insisted from the very beginning that standing down and bowing down is not an option. It wasn't an option then, and it's not an option now. You ought to celebrate that as extremism swept the South on Trump's coattails last November, something different happened in North Carolina. When all the votes were counted, and extremists had to move out of the governor's mansion. Yeah. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. They called us Moron Monday. They called us Money Monday. But he had to move. He didn't go easy, but we checked. He's out. And not only that, the race you ought to pay attention to is that in the South, an African-American judge won 76 counties. He won by 350,000 votes in the South. He won by 100,000 more votes than Trump in the South. Something is happening here that the nation can learn from. And not only that, the federal court declared that the North Carolina Republican suppression law was unconstitutional, and they ordered that this year we have to have a special election because we've got an unconstitutionally constituted General Assembly because of racially gerrymandered, unconstitutional districts. And you know why you won? Because you had an analysis that you had to have, that this state and this nation needed an MRI, a three-dimensional, when the heart is sick and you got to work on the heart, and x-ray ain't good enough. That's just two-dimensional. You need to see the front of the heart and the side of the heart and the back of the heart And in our movement, we had an MRI. We knew that in order to turn things around, we needed to focus on morals and values, racism and discrimination, income and economic injustice, and pull everybody together. But we also knew that you can't come quick and quit. You got to stick and stay. In reality, we learned a lesson that was taught in the scriptures nearly 3,000 years ago. And when you face domination and extremism, the story teaches us in the Bible, y'all don't mind if I talk from the Bible a minute, do you? That we got to remember, says this story, whose we are, and keep perspective in the struggle, and we've got to get our marching orders for daily operations of resistance, not just one rally of resistance. And let me remind you, that story was about 3 Hebrew boys. They called them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That actually wasn't their name, that was their slave name. But it didn't matter what somebody calls you. What matters is what you answer to. Now, these boys were millennials. Where are all the millennials out there? These boys was millennial, and in my imagination, maybe one of them was from the Fight for 15 of their day. And maybe one of them was with the Black Lives Matter of their day. And maybe one of them was with the Moral Monday movement of their day. But in their day, these 3 faced the egomaniac narcissist who liked to build towers. That's what the story says. This guy loved to build towers, and he loved to put gold on his towers. And they tell me that no one had ever seen a tower like Nebuchadnezzar's tower. He loved to cover stuff up and make it shine, because that was a sign of his insecurity. Anytime you're wealthy and you still got to put gold on it, that's insecurity. And this guy named Nebuchadnezzar, Greatwood, he wanted all the leaders of the provinces, that was the state legislatures 3,000 years ago, and the governors of that day, he wanted everybody to come to bow down to him in the tower. He had his own press team, and they liked to put out alternative facts and lies. One of those alternative lies was that King Nebi was the greatest thing that we'd ever seen. His name actually means, help me my Jewish friends, one who will hold on to power by any means necessary. He came to power in a rigged selection, and they decided to give him the kingship. So he decided to have an inauguration and make everybody come bow down to him. You want an appointment? Bow down. You want a job? Bow down. You want some money for your little organization? You got to come to the tower and bow down. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego boycotted, and they refused to bow. And Nebuchadnezzar told those Hebrew boys that if they didn't bow, he was going to throw them in the fire. And he questioned if their God could save them. But they said, King, we don't even have to answer you. Yes! We know our history. Our God can save. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down, because standing down and bowing down is not an option. What he didn't know was those boys had a fire already inside of them. They knew their history. They refused to eat the king's meat and drink the king's wine at in Babylon. I'm getting a little confused here. Yeah. Rather than get drunk with the wine of the world and forget those who came before them, they told themselves the stories of deliverance from Egypt. They sang the songs of Zion, and it steeled their spirits. Even if it doesn't, we're not bowing down. The king and his men didn't know, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were the moral movement of their day. They understood that bowing down is not an option. I want to suggest to you that even in the 21st century, When politicians will do anything to gain power, the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar still lives. When narcissism, lies, and hate are flowing from the White House down, the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar still lives, which means standing down and bowing down is not an option. When a General Assembly calls a special session under the guise of helping storm victims, only to create their own storm of unconstitutional legislation that wreaks havoc on the governor's ability to appoint department heads and board of election chairs, then for everybody who loves justice, bowing down and standing down is not an option. When leadership that claims to put North Carolina first stubbornly refuses to repeal the anti-family, anti-worker, anti-LGBTQ hate bill 2 that has cost North Carolina billions in lost revenue, then we have to know bowing down and standing down is not an option. When congressional elected representatives who receive the best health care just because they got elected, but then once they get elected, they don't want the people that elected them to have the same thing that they had. When you're willing to take insurance with people from people with pre-existing conditions, over 52 million Americans under 65, 2 million in North Carolina. When you have approximately 9.5 million women who were previously uninsured that gained insurance through the Affordable Care Act, and when you name it the Obamacare as a slight, because you're trying to racialize, you're trying to make it negative, just like you used to label certain things communism. And when you do that, and when you want to take health care because you despise a black president that did what you wouldn't do, and then you want to take that money and give tax breaks to the greedy, then bowing down and standing down is not an option. Yeah, when the president is more committed to fear-mongering and race-baiting and scapegoating and hate-fueling and tweet storms than using the power of government to guarantee equal protection under the law and promote policies that build up community, then we who believe in freedom must plant our feet and say bowing down and standing down is not enough. When the president can con workers to believe he's for workers, while he seeks to appoint a labor secretary that will use his power to attack businesses, a labor secretary who's anti-worker, anti-15, anti-raising the living wage, then we who believe in freedom must declare bowing down and standing down is not enough. When you can put to vote on the floor, Carol, and vote on a proven racist as Attorney General, but then you shut up a white woman reading the letter of the first black lady of the movement, Coretta Scott King, standing down. He's all right. It's not an option. It's all right. That's my brother. He's all right. When two senators, when two senators from this state, like Burr and Tillis, when they can vote for Jeff Sessions, but then refuse to vote for Loretta Lynch and refuse to vote for two other black women more qualified than them to be on the federal court, standing down is not an option. When Betsy DeVos can buy her way to a spot as Secretary of Education so that she can deconstruct the Department of Education, then standing down is not an option. When far too many white people in the South who need social safety nets and need living wages and need health care are tricked into voting for candidates who vote against the very things they need, Standing down is not an option. When far too many black people, after all the struggles we've been through, got the nerve to stay home and not vote. Standing down is not an option. And when from the White House to the Republican legislature, they keep telling the lie about voter fraud and not the truth about voter suppression. One of the most underreported stories of 2016, Democrats and Republicans, was this was the first election without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. We had 25 debates during both parties' primaries, Democrat and Republican, and general election. Y'all, it's cool. Y'all just stay back. It's cool. No, don't just stay back. It's general election and not a single hour on voting rights. Not a single hour on voting rights. Think about that. My brother, he's all right. He just listening. He's all right. Let my brother, he gonna be our warrior. Yeah. My brother. When we see that happening, when we see in this fact that since 2010, we've had 22 states that have passed voter suppression laws. 22 states that have passed voter suppression laws where you've had the highest turnout of black and brown people. And on election day, there were 868 fewer polling places in states with histories of discrimination. And there were 158 less voting sites in the black communities in North Carolina. When people will cheat like that, standing down is not an option. When some politicians spend all day hating our LGBT community and get some preachers who claim to do it in the name of the Jesus of love, which is a theological lie. And they spend all day trying to hate people rather than trying to figure out how we can all be more loving, how we can all be more caring, how we can all be more community, then standing down is not an option. And when so-called white evangelicals like Franklin Graham, who claimed to follow Jesus, the Jesus who cared about the poor, the Jesus who cared about the least of these, and when he can misuse, he and others, the scriptures and faith to promote hate, and when they can claim that the only issues we ought to be concerned about in the public square is where you stand on the issue of abortion, where you stand on the issue of homosexuality, where you stand on the issue of prayer in the school, where you stand on the issue of private property rights, and where you stand on the issue of guns. The truth is, that's heresy. You want to know where God is concerned? God is concerned about the poor and the sick and the least of these and every member of the human family. That is why standing down is not an option. And so, my friends, we need an analysis. Others paved the way of moral resistance, and like those before us, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it's our time now. Tell your neighbor, it's our time. That's all. It's our time to join the legacy that declares standing down and bowing down is not an option. It's our time to press on in the face of backlash. This extremism is actually a sign of how strong we are. Let me reinterpret something for you. If you weren't strong, people wouldn't rig the elections, spend pornographic sums of money, go all the way to Russia to hack the system. That's not a sign of your weakness. You only cheat those whom you fear. Nobody fights you this hard in so many unscrupulous ways if you're weak. And so we gotta stand, y'all, protecting and expanding voting rights, holding on to the equal protection under the law pro-labor, anti-poverty, anti-racist policies that lift up the poor, equality in education for every child, health care for all, environmental protection, protecting women's health, fairness in the criminal justice system, fighting the proliferation of guns. On those issues, we must declare to the entire world, standing down is not an option. Like the poet Jane Cortez has said, we better steel ourselves and say, if we don't fight, if we don't resist, if we don't organize and unify and get power to control our own lives, then we will wear the exaggerated look of submission, the bizarre look of suicide, and the dehumanized look of fear, and the decomposed look of repression forever and ever. Like with Dr. King, we must confess there comes a time when silence is betrayal, and that we must have an eternal dissatisfaction with poverty, racism, materialism, and militarism. Yes, there's a time that we must, like Jesus, say woe unto those who engage in religious practices, who try to pray at the beginning of Congress and at the beginning of the legislative session, who put your hands on a Bible when you swear into office, but you leave undone the weightier matters of the law, which are love and justice and mercy and faith. Yes, there comes a time we have to be like the Apostle Paul and proclaim, we do not belong to those who shrink back unto destruction and are destroyed, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul, because faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't bow down. They went into fire. Yes, they had adversity. Yes, they had difficulty, but they didn't bow down. They didn't stand down because they knew standing down was not an option. And they changed the fire rather than letting the fire change them. They changed the climate. They brought about a moral revolution. They even affected the king, because when you're right, when you stand for right, love will stand with you. Truth will stand with you. Grace will stand with you. Mercy will stand with you. Power will stand with you. Yeah, if we stand up going into the fire, then we will be standing coming out of the fire. During slavery, it looked like justice had lost. But Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Quakers and white evangelicals, they got together and formed a fusion movement and declared standing down was not an option. And when it was over, they came out free. Women didn't have the right to vote, but Sojourner Truth and Elizabeth Cady Stanton got together. And they tell me that some men tried to explain to them it wasn't their time, it wasn't their place. But they persisted. They organized the first women's march, and they won the right to vote because they knew standing down was not an option. Plessy versus Ferguson looked like it had the victory, but then Thurgood Marshall got white lawyers and black lawyers and Jewish lawyers, and they went in saying standing down is not an option. And when the case was over, an all-white Supreme Court with one member who had been part of the KKK voted unanimously to tear down separate but equal. When young people were being slaughtered like pigs in Mississippi, Emmett Till, Swanner, Channing Goodman, Mamie Till said, I ain't bowing down. You killed him, now you're gonna look at him. I'm gonna show you what hate looks like. And though they killed Swanner, Channing Goodman, Schnitt, and the youth and college division of the NAACP kept going south during the Freedom Summer. And Fannie Lou Hamer, their mentor, would tell them, look here, there comes a time that you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and the only thing left to do is to plant your feet and stand your ground. It looked like Jim Crow was a force that couldn't be challenged, But Rosa Parks told a bus driver in Montgomery, standing down is no longer an option. She linked up with Martin King and Bayard Rustin and Glenn Smiley and Jonathan Daniel and Viola Woosa, who was white, and others, and they abolished Jim Crow, declaring that standing down wasn't an option. They beat up on the folk in South Africa, but Bishop Tutu and Mandela said, even if you put me on Rikers Island, standing down is not an option. They overcame the fire, and if they did it, so can we. So I came to tell you and to declare right here and right now, looking down is not an option. Talking down is not an option. Sitting down is not an option. Being down is not an option. Falling down is not an option. Bowing down is not an option. Standing down is not an option. The guy in the White House is a mortal, not a god. The members of the General Assembly are mortals and not God. The members of the Congress, they are mortals, not God. Bowing down is not an option. Now, preachers, one day, yeah, Lord, we gonna bow, Carolyn. One day we gonna bow when the crooked places are made straight, when the rough places are made smooth, when the mountains are made low, and when the valleys are lifted up, and the glory of the Lord is revealed, and we shall see the glory. We will bow then, but until then, bowing down is not an option. Bowing down is not an option. We may be headed into some fiery times. Sometimes our minds will get tired. Sometimes our body will get tired. But my mama's here, 83 years old. She had me 2 days after the March on Washington. She said, I never thought I would have a baby, that when he was 50 years old, he'd still be fighting some of the battles that I fought. But she said, boy, you better fight. You better fight, because bowing down is not an option. I feel a song in my spirit. What do you do when you've done all you can and it seems like it's never enough? What do you say when your friends turn away and you're all alone? When you've given your all and it seems like you can't make it through, you just stand. Stand. Watch the Lord see you through. Tell me, how do you handle the guilt of the past? How do you deal with the stain? How can you smile when your heart's been broken and filled with pain? When you've given everything you have and you're trying to make it through, you just stand. Won't He see you through? Stand through the storm. Stand through the racism. Stand through the rain. Stand through the hurt. Stand. Yeah, stand. Don't you stop. Don't you bend. Don't you break. After all we've been through, stand, stand, stand. Bowing down is not an option. Do I have a witness? Stand, stand, stand. Wow. Grab somebody by the hand if you're going to stand. Tell them I can't let you go. Tell them you don't stand alone. You stand on the shoulders of those before you. We stand together. That's why we're not going to fall. And when you're weak, you may call it the Great Spirit. You may call it the Zeitgeist. You may call it the Holy Ghost. But whatever you call it, there's power When you stand for what's right, I declare something will come help you. When you stand for what's right, something will get in the fire with you. I don't know how difficult it's going to be. We may have to go to D.C. and do some moral Mondays. We might have to go to jail. But what I do know is that bowing down and standing down is not an option. You just let's help each other. As that song is playing, I think they have the CD too. If you do, just put it on. And I'm having you hold people's hand for a little bit, because this ain't gonna be a quick. We dealing with stuff that has international locking. You talking about wickedness in high places. Turn to your neighbor and say, you're gonna have to really stand. Can somebody? Okay, that's all right. Play it, Freddie. Now, on February, where's Laurel at? In Gatewood, y'all come. On February the 27th, we gotta move from mobilization to moving. Bring it down just a little bit. On February the 27th, we want our branches and other organizations to lead marches into the local congressional offices. We're gonna put out a list of moral demands, and then we want you to go back home and find out when every local congressional meeting is being held, town hall, and fill them up. All right? Number two, we want you to go back and demand of your legislature that they have a town hall. Tell them no more hiding. Secondly, we want you to know that in March, we're going to be announcing the mass People's Assembly. I hope this same crowd would come back and fill up the General Center all the way in the back around our issues. We're going to show them you can't divide us, because the same people that vote against public education vote against voting rights, and the same people that vote against voting rights vote against health care, the same people that vote against health care vote against the LGBTQ community, and the same people that vote against the LGBT community vote against environmental justice and women's health, and I could go on and on, but y'all get my drift. We're gonna stand together. We're gonna be sending out some things, because we're gonna have to keep challenging this legislature, because people talk about national movements. If we're gonna change the country, we've got to nationalize state movements. It's not from DC down, it's from the states up. And I'm traveling around the country helping other states engage that, and you're gonna have to do it. It's not about any one leader. It's about who we are together. It's about this moment. Now I'm here to announce also that 2 weeks ago, the executive committee of the NAACP in the state voted unanimously to submit a request to begin consideration of an economic boycott of some type here in North Carolina, because, and media get it right, it's not just because of HB2 and the bathroom. That was bad enough. My transgender brothers and sisters that are here with me, that was bad enough. That was ugly. That was mean. But see, they try to use my transgender brothers and sisters as a scapegoat and a cover, because the bill was also anti-living wages and anti-access to the courts. But then they passed SB 4. Then they refused to redo the districts. And so they have been stepping on things that people bled for, even after they've lost. And so it might be that we have to not only check them in the ballot box, but check them at the cash register. And what we're saying, if the NBA and the NCAA and the ACC can't come here because of a bathroom, we don't want folk coming here if they're gonna take our voting rights. And I don't know what it's gonna look like. That's not my call. Our job in the state is to submit it. We'll talk about it. It's various ways of doing it. But what we're talking about is having a serious conversation, because standing down is not an option. If you're here today, I want to also ask you to go online and you can make a donation, or you can join the ranks of the NAACP. I belong to most of all the progressive organizations. The only reason I don't belong because you didn't give me a sheet yet. But it takes some money to fight. Mean folk got mean money, moral folk need some moral money. So we didn't want to be passing baskets around. But you can go online and then you can join the NAACP. And we want you to go and join up on our instant constant contact, because this is a long one, y'all. When Donald Trump said, "I am your last chance," you got to really understand what he was saying. He was looking at 2030. He was looking at the changing demographics, and he was sowing the seeds of racial fear and economic fear. I am your last chance to try to do some things that in a few years, because the diversity of the nation is changing, you won't be able to get elected to do it. So in a real sense, my brothers and sisters, we might need to start saying what they used to say in South Africa. And that is, when the people of apartheid began to get worse, somebody came up with the phrase, "Only a dying mule kicks the hardest." I have a dear friend named Valerie, who's a Sikh. And there's an effort going on the 14th called Revolutionary Love Day. You can Google it. She's helping to lead that. And we were together one time, and she told me to tell y'all this. She said, there are two different kinds of wombs. She said one is the womb of the tomb, where things go to die and stay dead. And she said, then there is the womb of the body, where things are to be birthed. Both of them are dark. She said, what if in this moment it's not a tomb, but a womb? And the question of what will be birthed in this moment will be dependent on how we breathe and how we push. What if we just stand and the resources of heaven and earth that we need come? Others did it. It's our time. Turn one more time to the neighbor. Say, neighbor, this is what you really ought to be shouting about. The fact that this is not happening and you are not here to fight it. You should be shouting that this is happening and God has chosen for you to be alive, to fight back and stand up. Tell your neighbor, say, I'm glad that I'm here with you, and I've got sense enough to know that in the face of hate, in the face of injustice, in the face of meanness and racism and harm and bullying and lies, tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, I'm clothed in my right mind. And if I don't know nothing else, I know this: standing down and bowing down is not an option. God bless you. Let's fight. Hold on one second, I just got a call. Joan Baez wants to talk to y'all. You got on the phone? Joan Baez. She said y'all have inspired her to get back up. You got the phone? We're gonna get her on the phone. Yeah. Come here, y'all, while we getting it on.
All right, folks, say it with me. We are the moral resistance. And we have to stay in touch. So what I need you all to do after you leave is visit one of two websites, either www.HKonJ.com or www.naacpnc.org to sign the Moral Resistance Pledge. If you want more information about when we will go on Raleigh, sign the pledge. If you want more information about the boycott, sign the pledge and all upcoming days of action. Thank you.
All right. Get real quiet. Bring the music take it all the way down. And when we finish this call, we're gonna give out a mighty shout. And you all know that at Moral Monday, don't ever trust moral resistors that can't dance. Because we got to have. Joan?
Well, hello everybody. And the Reverend talks way better than I do, but I don't know how he sings. So I'm just going to sing you a little piece of something as my contribution to today's wonderful activities. And it goes like this. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, gonna build a brand new world. Ain't gonna let no man turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no man turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, gonna build a brand new world.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. Now, you stay on the line. We want her to hear all of y'all, 80,000 plus, all of y'all here. Come on. Ain't gonna let nobody. Well, my Lord, ain't gonna let turn me. I'm gonna keep on. Bring them up here. You hear us? My Lord, ain't gonna let. Thank everybody for coming. Thank our staff. Let's get ready for this election this year. Let's keep mobilizing. Let's keep moving. After this song, we're gonna have a little block party for just a few minutes. My Lord,